And I think the toughest part of a leader is to lead by example. You're talking about respect and dignity, you have to do it yourself. And that's the toughest part. So that's why I added a rider. If any of us lose it, we're not respectful, we're not displaying compassion, and we are aware of it, then within 24 hours, we need to apologize to the person. Equally, it's important for anybody in the organization who has felt humiliated or felt that she was not or he was not spoken to with respect, that they have a moral obligation to get back to the person. So it's important that we build that culture where we help each other.
Hello. Today we have the immense privilege of welcoming one of India's most respected obstetricians and gynecologists, Dr. Evita Fernandez, to the Luminary Lounge podcast. Dr. Fernandez is the founder and chairperson of the Fernandez Foundation, a leader in maternal and child health, known for promoting respectful maternity care and midwifery-led models across India. Her journey in medicine began with an MBBS from St. John's Medical College, Bangalore, followed by a DGO from Osmania University. She became a member of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, that's RCOG, London, in 1983, and was conferred the fellowship in 2001. Under her able leadership, Fernandez Hospital in Hyderabad has grown from a 40-bed facility to a 320-bed perinatal tertiary referral center, always been renowned for its ethical practices and compassionate care. She is the chairperson and managing director of Fernandez Foundation, as well as a managing trustee of the Dr. Leslie J. Fernandez Memorial Charitable Trust and the Fernandez Hospital Educational and Research Foundation. Dr. Fernandez's dedication to maternal health care has empowered countless women and inspired a new generation of leaders. Her work is a true testament to how one individual can transform the landscape of healthcare in a state and the country as well. I am Dr. Aruna Muralidhar, your host for this episode. Let's dive into this incredible conversation and gain insights from her remarkable journey. Welcome to Luminary Lounge, Dr. Fernandez. Luminary Lounge podcast, which aims to get insights from lives well lived. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Aruna. You've been extremely generous with your sentiments. My gosh, I'm quite embarrassed. But thank you. It's a privilege to be here with you today.
Well, we mean every single word, ma'am.
No, I know you do. I still feel awkward about that. Yeah, but thank you.
You've always, in your talks and in general, you've mentioned the influence of your parents. How did their values and approach to medicine and life in general shape the ethical foundation upon which you built your hospital and the foundation and carry on with it all these years? I mean, it would really be nice to know about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Aruna. Yes, I do believe our basic or rather the foundational values come from the home. And my dad raised us, we were 4 children, raised us with a firm belief to whom much is given, much is expected. So we were raised and we were very acutely aware that we were privileged. We had an education, we had a roof above our heads, we had meals every day. So much was expected from us. So that was kind of ingrained. The second thing, when our main meal was supper. So when we would meet around the table, what would impress me, and we'd all listen to the stories that my parents would tell us about their day's events. And what always came through was the fact that they were making a difference, that they were serving people, that they were helping people. There were stories of people who couldn't pay. And, between them, they try and figure out how do we help this person. I also knew of people who would come from outside Hyderabad. I mean, I'm going back to starting in the 50s, 60s. We were kids. And I remember food being sent across from our house for mothers who probably came from distances and couldn't have meals. So you saw that whole element of service. And the other thing, my dad was very, very clear. There was no fudging. We wouldn't fudge taxes. We paid our taxes. There was no question of deceiving the government or anything. So with that kind of a background, it was just easy for me to continue, frankly.
Right. I mean, your mother herself has been a very, very accomplished obstetrician. And I believe Stockholm, which she ran, also looked into women, as you rightly said, women who couldn't pay and also looked after uh, destitute or people at the end of life sort of scenarios, etc. I mean, what was your early childhood experiences around that time? Do you remember anything from those days when you would visit the hospital? Any particular
Yes.
influences?
Yes. I think one of the very strong images that I hold, particularly of my dad, was that he could be at home, sitting on the ground and eating jawari roti and pickle. And he could also rub shoulders with people, in tailored suits. He just made himself at home. So I think he made people feel comfortable. So that was it was a great lesson for me because sometimes when we would walk around in the hospital, he would meet people from the general ward and people from paying rooms, but the manner in which he related to people was just the same, that same sincerity, warmth. And my mother, oh gosh, she had such a zest for living. She played badminton in the evenings, apart from running evening OPs. She and my dad loved ballroom dancing, so they would go for dances, come back. She would be called for a birth and then she'd go back to the hall. Sometimes as kids, when we would go for a movie, which was quite rare as a family, we children would feel embarrassed because suddenly in the middle of the movie there would be this little slide. Dr. Fernandez wanted, could you please come to the manager's office? Which meant somebody was going to deliver and my mom would have to go and then come back and join the movie again. So I've seen, this aspect of their lives where they tried to be parents, socialize, and yet be there for their patients. So it
That's
was a
amazing.
very strong sense of service and doing the best you can. I think
And at the same time,
that's
not,
been great.
yeah. And at the same time, not compromising family values and also a very good work-life balance with,
Absolutely.
keeping up your hobbies.
Yeah, I just don't know how she did it, but I think she did it because they complemented each other so well. When mom was busy with an obstetric practice, dad was her support administrator. And of course, after the four of us were born, my dad decided to be a doctor. So he joined medical college and did, I think, 4.5 or 5 years of medicine. And he got a diploma called General Diploma in Medicine. So that gave him the license to be a family physician, which he was absolutely superb at. So you see, you
Yeah,
just grew up in an atmosphere of giving and serving and,
and sheer willpower.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
that's great. That's great. Dr. Fernandez, your journey in healthcare has undoubtedly been shaped by both personal and professional experiences, I'm sure. But are there any mentors who have deeply influenced your work or philosophy? Anybody you could sort of recount who could, along your journey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I probably have to wind back a little, Aruna. At the age of 16, at the age of 8, I felt called to be a doctor. I knew I wanted to be a doctor. At the age of 16, I felt called to be an obstetrician. I said, I just want to do what my mom's doing, because I saw the joy in her face, and she just loved what she did. And then between school and college, she asked if I would like to see a birth. And she took permission of the mother and she asked if I could stand at the side. So I stood in the shadows. And then she kept telling me just how wonderful nature is. Just look, just see how the baby comes. And she was, I think, she had the heart of a midwife. She wasn't interfering, just allowing the baby to, turn and all that. I mean, I was just absolutely gobsmacked and thought it was absolutely wonderful. So I knew I wanted to be an obstetrician. But, when we're young and you're in medical college, you think, I want to go out into the rural India and do service for the underprivileged and things. So when I finished with my house surgency at St. Martha's, Bangalore, um, just 2 days before I was winding up to come back to Hyderabad, absolutely confused in my head, saying my mom and dad are running a private hospital. My older brother was a doctor. I said, I can go off into rural India and do what I want to do. But at the same time, I was drawn to working with her. So I was very confused. And as I was going across the lobby of St. Martha's, I heard this booming voice, Peter. And I looked around, and there was this tall priest whom I had worked with between school and college, and I'd helped run summer camps and things. He said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm going back to Hyderabad. He said, oh, I'm going to Calcutta. Can I ride with you on the train? Okay. So 2 days later, Father Dominic Briganza is riding with me back to Hyderabad. He says, so what are you going to do? And so I said, Father, I'm so confused. He listened to me, and then he sat me down and he said, you have a head start in life. Not many people your age have a running hospital. You are a leader. I've watched you. God has given you leadership qualities. You can do whatever you want with that hospital, but be a voice in the community. Whatever you do, be a voice. Stand out for what is right. You have a golden opportunity. Aruna, I thought that was providential.
Yeah.
Meeting somebody just when I was walking across the lobby. Hadn't met him for years.
Yeah, at
And
crossroads.
that was the beginning of looking at my mother and dad's hospital and saying, okay, maybe I can do something with this. And so that was a pivotal moment. And of course, having a great teacher, Dr. Suvarna, was the consultant in Gandhi Hospital under whom I trained. And she was absolutely ethical. I mean, she looked after patients so beautifully. There was absolutely no difference between somebody who would come in to the paying room or to the general ward. And she was very ethical. If there was a patient that was referred or, you knew it was botched up, she would never, never encourage us to make a negative remark or about the doctor who had referred or the way the case was handled. She was very clear about certain things. I was very lucky to have that. And of course, my own mother, her bedside manner was legendary. I wish I could be 50% like she was, but she taught me the importance of respect, dignity, privacy. I mean, she was so hot on that. Never, never examine a woman without making sure there's a curtain, she's covered. I mean, these little things in communication and things. So I think all these individuals played their role. And of course, UK was mind blowing. My parents, when I finished my post-graduation, they said, come on, you've been so sheltered. Just get out of the house, go and see how the rest of the world lives. And that's how I went to the UK. And I didn't learn much OBGY. I think, but what I learned was much more than OBGY. I learned, my world expanded. I learned the importance of documentation, history taking, communication. How do you introduce yourself? How do you work with teams? Concept of protocols, the need for audits. I mean, it was just mind blowing. And that's when I began to think, I'm going to go back and create a safe place for women to come and birth. I have to confess, I saw myself only as an obstetrician, not as a gynecologist. And again, that's a privilege I've enjoyed, just not practicing gynecology, but my entire passion, my time, my interest around pregnancy and childbirth is very, very fortunate to have been able to do that. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think just the fact that, I mean, you were in the UK for how long, Dr.
Just
Fernandez?
13 months. Again,
13.
the,
Amazing.
the stars get aligned, Aruna. My boss, I mean, the consultant I did my DGO and she was a member of the Royal College. So when I applied to the college saying I want to do part one, part two, and you had to do your clinical attachments, my entire 2 years was accepted by the college. I didn't have to go to England and look for a job. So that was a huge blessing. They said do 1 year of allied subjects. So I did a year in anesthesia in a public hospital. So I learned to intubate, I learned to give spinals, and I would also double up sometimes as an obstetrician to help with surgeries when the volumes were huge. So I just had to take a job to understand how the UK system worked. And so I took the lowest rung of the job, the SHO job. So that gave me time to study. And so I did part one, part two, and came back. Yeah.
But then that shows your commitment, because just 13 months of UK experience motivated you and you learned so much, absorbed so much, and then implemented it, which is amazing. So, Dr. Fernandez, coming to, outside of your career, I mean, anything that has deeply influenced you, how you approach your work today, any pivotal moments in your life outside of your career? Yeah.
I think outside of my career, just reading about the lives of people, also books that I had read, made a deep impression on me. Meeting individuals in leadership positions, seeing how they function, seeing how they build institutes, I think that helped me a lot to sort of focus on what I wanted to do. Keep in mind, when I came back from England, I came with just one focus: to build an institute that would make everyone feel safe. So everything else was kind of off my radar. And unfortunately, in 85, my only brother died rather suddenly of a berry aneurysm. That shattered my parents because he left a young widow with two little boys and a third on the way. So the reins were handed over to me, and I just had to plug in and move on. So in the early years, while I dreamt of doing things, I wasn't really prepared to take on the responsibility that early. So I had to kind of learn things on the run. So anything outside the hospital that would interest me was essentially to see how I could do better. How can I work towards this dream of creating a safe haven for mothers? So I began to read about teamwork, protocols. How do you build trust? How do you communicate your vision? So for the first probably 20 years, I just focused on creating an institute and very, very clear objectives. A, teamwork. B, evidence-based protocol-led practice. C, if we have the volumes, then we will teach and train. 4, if we have the volumes, we will indulge in research. And 5th, which was the most important, how do we give back to the underprivileged? So there are very clear objectives, and I was very, very fortunate to have colleagues who were as crazy as me and who believed in this philosophy of working together. So it meant the spotlight doesn't shine on you. It meant that you had to whittle away your ego and you had to build people around, so the spotlight needs to shine on everyone. And I was just so lucky that my colleagues who joined me also, each of them took a special interest. So that's how we began to build. Yeah.
So I think the whole team building exercise must have given you a lot of insights and learning. Is there anything that you would like to tell somebody who's trying to do a similar thing in their own setup? How do we get people of different attitudes, different backgrounds, different competencies to work for a similar ethos, a similar
Mm-hmm.
motto or vision?
Mm-hmm.
Any insights towards that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, Aruna. I think the first thing is if you are in a position of leadership and you want to start something, be very, very clear about what you want to do. The second, why do you want to do it? If you're very clear about these two questions, then the next thing I would urge the individual to do is to write down what are your non negotiables for this project that you will never compromise on, because that's important. That becomes your compass, your North Star, and that holds you in good stead through the dark periods, through the challenges, not compromising on the non negotiables. Then obviously nothing can be achieved alone. You've got to build a team. So if you have to build a team, then you have to be very clear with your communication and choose people very well, people you can trust, people who believe in the philosophy. And very soon you will realize there are the oddballs, and if they destroy the fabric of the organization, if they are actually toxic, they may be crowd pullers, but if they are toxic, then you must have the courage to let them go and move on and believe that if what you are doing is clean, it's right, it's ethical, the stars get aligned. One door closes, another door opens. But I think it's very, very important that you don't compromise on what you consider are the non negotiables. And your core group then also has to accept that. Once you get that, diversity makes no difference. In fact, diversity adds richness because each one has their own unique strengths. And over the years, I've learned to focus on the strengths of people, navigate through the weaknesses. We all have our weaknesses. I mean, I'm just so grateful that my colleagues accepted me as I am. I was a tyrant in the early years of my leadership because I just didn't have the wisdom I have today. And yet, they walked with me. They could have walked away, but they chose to accept me. And they chose to tell me how terrible I was. And I'm so grateful to them because that's what made me change and realize that respect, trust needs to be built. And just because you're the boss, you can't throw your weight around. And that's why, because I know I may have caused so much harm at that time, unknowingly in my desire to want things now, respectful care has become so, so very important for all of us across the organization. And it's not just care for patients, it's the way we treat each other. How do I talk to my security guard? How do I engage with my housekeeping person? How do I deal with my consultants? I mean, we're all one, as a family. Yes, organizations have structures because you need to function. But at the end of the day, I should be able to hug my housekeeping person with the same vigor that I hug a colleague.
Absolutely right. Regarding team building itself, how do you deal with juniors or anybody for that matter who been, let's say, undermined or you're just not being given opportunities by somebody else in the team? How does anybody whistle blow to you, or how do you keep vigilant about these things happening? Is there any sort of process for that?
Yeah. When we were a smaller group and one hospital, it was far easier because, you kind of met every day, you interacted. But as we began to grow, it became more difficult. And so one of the things that I consistently keep talking about, and also my colleagues, the seniors, we need to walk the talk. A, no bullying. B, being respectful. C, spotting talent and getting them to grow. My colleagues today who are actually representing Fernandez and leading even sitting in on national policies, are all youngsters who joined me as registrars. Today, they are heads of departments representing Fernandez. And that was the philosophy. Look out for talent. Get that person, to tap into her talent, do everything to get her to grow, and then let her fly. If she stays with you, it's icing on the cake. If she doesn't, don't be angry, don't be hurt. Though initially you would feel that way, but then it wasn't meant to be, and that's fine. There will be somebody else who will come. It's not easy, particularly in today's healthcare industry. There's poaching happening all the time. But the people who believe in the philosophy will continue to be with you. So that's one part of the story. So as youngsters come in, we try and get them to buddy with somebody. Because right now we're in the fourth generation of consultants that have grown in Fernandez. So probably about 40 consultants now across the three organizations who are kind of homegrown. So when a youngster comes in, they are quite moved by the commitment that they see with the seniors. So that's the first thing. The second thing, a youngster will come with a lot of enthusiasm, with an idea that can be quite different. I'm trying to encourage our own homegrown people to listen. Listen first. It may be radical, but don't splash water and, explore, think, reflect. There are times when I know there's a bit of bullying, and bullying, we have zero tolerance for bullying. We have zero tolerance for anybody being disrespectful in the way they've spoken to colleagues. And if it comes up and we encourage that kind of whistleblowing, if you see things like this, please, either you talk to the person straight away or tell the next person. If the next person you're not able to, then it comes straight to me. Let me give you an example. Some time ago, there was a meeting and there was a discussion, and now we're all on Zoom connected. And one of the consultants, in her enthusiasm to voice an opinion, came across as being extremely rude and dogmatic. And it didn't sit very well with quite a few in the room. The person herself was totally unaware of how she came across. I wasn't there at the meeting, but by the end of the day, I had 4 people, a junior, mid-level, and two seniors, tell me that this happened and they were uncomfortable, and one of them had already spoken to the colleague. Now, the fact that 4 people at different levels told me, I thought, I asked for the recording and I listened to it. And yes, it did come across as being very rude. So all I did was just have a quiet chat to the person concerned and saying, maybe you need to apologize to the person. And that's what happened. Air was cleared and we moved on. So if you, in a leadership position, can walk the door, can encourage this kind of feedback, and display zero tolerance for disrespectful behavior or bullying, then it trickles down. And when your leaders at different levels do the same, then the chances of suppressing talent will be less. Whenever, when there's a conference in the WhatsApp group of the seniors, I always see, can we send this person? Can we send this registrar? That student is working on this thesis. Why doesn't she present? It gives me great joy to find mid-level consultants always looking out for youngsters to go out and represent Fernandez. I think it's a culture that we all have to build and constantly work on. It's never easy, Aruna. You will always, because we're dealing with human nature and all of us have egos. All of us want to be recognized and appreciated. And it's just constant working on that.
Honestly, I think it's the leaders' ethos and values that sort of distill through the different levels of hierarchy. And if
Mhm.
somebody is feeling extremely sort of, let's say, uh, feeling let's challenged by somebody, for
Mhm.
example, I think it's important to address it because
Mhm.
it sort of before it sort of builds up to a certain level. So I think it's important to shed your ego levels and work together as a team. So I think that's a
Mhm.
very important point that you brought
Mhm.
about. Uh,
Yeah, no, I just want to share something. Aruna, one of the things that we did was, we changed our logo and our tagline in 2022 after a lot of soul searching. So we were also sort of getting the branding across the organization. And one of the things we had to do was get a name badge. So we took a conscious decision that all our badges would just have our first names. That's it, nothing else. So my housekeeping person has her first name. The security guard has his first name. I have my first name. And it's a single uniform badge that all of us sport. It's a tiny, tiny decision, but it sends out very strong message that we're all one
equal.
family and we're
Well, let's get into something a little lighter. I I have been told by many that you're a voracious reader and game for anything that can enlighten you and your team. So I believe a lot of WhatsApp exchange of podcasts that you've seen or, quotes and books that you've read, whatever it may be. Are there any books or podcasts or anything that you follow now, you're reading now that have particularly influenced you along the journey? Have you read a book many a times? And what are you currently reading or listening to? We'd love to know that.
Yeah. I think one of the books that I read very, very early, probably 3 years into my leadership, was Stephen Covey's book, Seven Habits. That made a huge impression on me. Then I went on to reading his principle centered leadership, which I often dig into even now just to read some quotes and share it with youngsters. There was another book by Scott Peck long ago called The Road Less Traveled. In the last few years, I've been reading more on management, organization structure, because my role has changed. I'm more in the background, trying to be a mentor and guiding people. On the lighter side, I love the Reacher novels. I don't know if you've read them, Lee Child. Yeah. So I just love that. It's a great time pass. I love crime and murder and whatever. Uh, but a book that I'm reading at the moment, see, I have 4 or 5 books at different levels because depending on my mood, I change. I could be reading philosophy or something very serious or something as light as the Reacher novels. So this one is an amazing book. It's called 15, and it's about 15 women in India who played a big role in the Constituent Assembly and the challenges that they worked with. Oh gosh, you feel so proud that we've got this rich legacy. Another book that I'm reading at the moment, again, incredible, is called Signs. It's this woman who discovered she's got this medium, this ability to connect with people who have gone on, and the uncanny ways of loved ones connecting with people. Gives you a lot of comfort, but it also makes your hair stand. I find it amazing. I tend more towards non-fiction than fiction. Now, podcasts can vary from the serious to the funny. I mean, the BBC, Just a Minute. Sometimes I listen to the old shows of desert island discs. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but they go back to the 70s, 80s. Other podcasts during my walk, it could be something very serious on leadership or just something very funny, but most times it's serious during my walks. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I also heard that you love the Harry Potter series. Check it
Oh,
out. Not embarrassing because I love
yes, I do.
Harry Potter.
I
Yeah.
loved reading Harry Potter. Sadly, I haven't completed the entire set, but as I read a book, I would watch the movie, so I could kind of connect. But no, I found Harry Potter fascinating. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yes.
It
I
transforms.
make it a point, Aruna, to read before I go to bed at night. Anything non-medical, but I must read. Yes.
Do you maintain a journal which could possibly turn into an autobiography? I'm not sure if somebody is actually writing your biography now, or whether you have penned down, the details which could turn into an autobiography later on. But do you have this habit of journaling every day, or?
I used to in the early years, but no, not anymore. I use an iPad, and sometimes when a thought strikes me, I just put it down, but it's not a regular journal that I used to do when I was younger. Yeah, well, one of the things I don't stop doing is this exercise from Seven Habits. I don't know if you've ever read the book, but in one of the chapters, Stephen Covey tells you, imagine you're at a funeral and you're walking up to the casket to pay your respects. And you actually find that you are in that casket. So you're at a funeral, and there are four people who have been asked to speak, to say something about you. It could be your spouse if you're married, or it could be a sibling if you're single, or whoever, some person from your family, somebody from your workplace, somebody from your community. What would you like them to say about you? And that really is what your life is about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And on the 1st of Jan, I usually sit down and ask myself, who am I? So in the early years, it would be, you know, first I'd be a doctor, leader, daughter, things. And as your role changes, who am I? Your roles also change in priority. Today, if I ask myself, who am I? I'll say first human being. My doctor would be right down because I'm not clinically involved, but, and I'd have to say mentor, leader, but my doctor role is right at the bottom. So it's interesting when you just sit down and from time to time ask yourself,
Respect. Yeah.
who am I and what is my purpose? And it just keeps you grounded. Yeah.
That's a nice exercise for the 1st of Jan. And
Yes.
let's
Yes.
hope many of us will do it and figure out who we are at the end of the whole year. And what about vision for healthcare, right?
Huh?
You have tremendous motto, a vision to achieve. Um, you also, sort of quoted, if a community values the children, it should value its mothers, right?
Mhm.
So if you passionately advocate women-centered care and listening to women in healthcare, so listening and sort of understanding their needs, was it any specific turning point in your career that led you to sort of redefine maternal healthcare with this kind of focus? Perhaps patient's experience that profoundly shifted your approach?
Yes. Yes, Aruna. There were two, three things that happened. I call them the light bulb moments that popped in my head. I think most of us obstetricians, I'm sure, believe that and childbirth are very significant events. Pregnancy is meant to be joyous. It's physiological, so it should be joyous. And childbirth, obviously, the most significant transformative experience. And all of us want it to be positive. So when I discovered Nutan Pandit's book way, way back, it was lovely, her style of writing, very simple. So I used to give it to mothers to read, and they would love it. And I also encourage mothers to be physically fit. So I had mothers who would swim. In fact, I had three women who kept swimming till about 2 weeks before they set into labor. And so, and I would talk about, just wait for nature to work, don't worry, things like that. And at some point, I discovered that Nutan was in Delhi. So I invited her to Hyderabad. I said, why don't you run an antenatal course for our mothers? I think there are about 6 or 7 couples. And she ran it a whole week. And I said, Nutan, do you mind if I pop in and hear what you're saying? And to my horror, I discovered that while I have all this lovely philosophy in my head that pregnancy is great, it's normal, and childbirth should be. My practices in the birthing room were not in tune with what I believed. We were actually quite interventional because by this time we had become a referral center with a lot of high-risk mothers. So the odd low-risk mother was also being subjected to some of these what if. So a low-risk mother would have an IV lying, things like that. And I thought, good God, this is ridiculous. We need to start looking at our practices. So that was the beginning of my turning point. But simultaneously, as we were a referral center, we got mothers referred to us, and some of them would die. So my interest in maternal death led me to midwifery. Because countries that have that strong midwifery cadre as an integral part of maternal and health newborn services had very low maternal deaths. UK is a classic example. Sweden, Netherlands. I thought, India, we don't have. So I said, let's pilot a program. Let's train a group of nurses in Fernandez. So I understand what a midwife is. What is her role? What is she capable of? The stars got aligned. I had help from the UK. We had a curriculum. We followed the global standards of International Confederation of Midwives. Very, very clear. 8 clinical competencies is what that midwife needs. So we got a 2-year curriculum, gave it my best. When I began to read about midwifery, the philosophy, looking at natural birth, normal labor, I said, good God, we obstetricians have lost the plot. When I began to listen to the UK midwives, and then, they would challenge everything we were doing, and I realized we need to change. We thought Fernandez was the best place for women to birth. We thought we were women-centered, but certainly not. We were far from it. So we began to chip away at practices that had become so ingrained. And again, I don't blame anybody. That's how we were trained. We didn't know any better. If I had not got into midwifery, I would have been cruising along, probably doing what I was doing. But once I knew the truth, once I knew the reality, I couldn't continue because in Fernandez, one of the strongest USPs is I'm surrounded by walking consciences. Every consultant has the right to challenge. If we are doing something unethical or we are not giving evidence-based care, they are all encouraged to challenge. And if I realize that what we are doing is wrong, I cannot look at myself in the mirror the next day. So that's how 180-degree turn in our childbirth practices. And I said, I felt called now to make that my mission, to undo the damage that we obstetricians are unknowingly doing and work with midwives collaboratively. So ultimately, the woman and her newborn gets the care that she needs. Magic happens when we work together.
So the light bulb moment was a couple of years ago, I mean, about few
Yes,
years
around
ago,
2000, between 2007 and 10, I met Nutan Pandit, and then by 2010, we had the curriculum for midwifery. 2011, we launched it. And now, of course, the government of India has made it a national campaign.
That's probably a huge achievement. I mean, working with the government, with all the bureaucracy and trying to make them understand the importance of such programs, it's not an easy feat. So kudos to you. We'll come to that as to, how you managed to get over all the obstacles along the way. But continuing on the same sort of ethos, you've spoken about importance of empathy in maternal care. How do you balance the deeply human side of your work with the demanding responsibilities of running a hospital or an institution? Are there moments when one aspect pulls you more than the other? I mean, when, empathy as well as the demands of a challenging sort of leadership role.
Mm. Yeah.
How do
Thank
you
you.
manage that?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think that is something that will always be part and parcel of a leader's journey. This pull between empathy, compassion, and yet you need to be firm to make those very hard decisions. To begin with, as a human being, I think we all need to have compassion and to empathize, more so as a doctor, and I guess even more important as a leader. So, in the last few years, Aruna, I've been doing a lot of reading on compassionate leadership. In fact, during COVID, I enrolled online for courses on compassionate leadership. I'm just rewinding to 85, between 85 and 89, when leadership was thrust upon me. I didn't know a lot about leadership. The finer points. I was abrasive, I was obnoxious. I wanted things now. I would bang on the table, I would throw instruments, I would shake people up. And it's only when, I began to read and my colleagues would tell me the change began to happen. And I think the toughest part of a leader is to lead by example. You're talking about respect and dignity, you have to do it yourself. And that's the toughest part. So that's why I added a rider. If any of us lose it, respectful, we're not displaying compassion, and we are aware of it, then within 24 hours, we need to apologize to the person. Equally, it's important for anybody in the organization who has felt humiliated or felt that she was not or he was not spoken to with respect, that they have a moral obligation to get back to the person. Like my consultant, she wasn't even aware that she was coming across as being rude or disrespectful. And if I didn't get back to her, she would do it unknowingly the next time. So it's important that we build that culture where we help each other. And, so on one hand, while you're firm, you're also allowing the human side when it happens. How do we do damage control? I hope I've answered your question, because there's no easy solution. It's a constant reflection, constant introspection. The other thing that has helped me is I never make decisions alone. I stopped doing that years ago. When there are difficult decisions, decisive decisions, you always have a small core group that you can trust, that you can, throw ideas around, that it's a safe space. Ultimately, when I have to make that final decision, then I go into myself and I spend time quiet. I pray. I ask for God's guidance to make the right choice. Then you do it.
Absolutely. I think amazing, sort of, let's say, strategies that you use and make it more of a team-based approach, because you get so many different inputs, so many different perspectives, and it's all about getting the right perspective and the right decision out of there.
Yes.
I think I think the next question was about personal values that have kept you grounded through these challenging times. And I think you've already thrown light about that. And you also said that your values have evolved over the course of your career.
Yes.
So many light bulb moments, and you've been able to change according to the times. Is there anything that you kind of reflect upon in terms of, let's say, technology, or even now AI, or let's say something else comes up? How do you integrate that into your system? Because I know you're a large system. You've got somebody who looks after your finances. You have somebody who looks after the technology side of things. You've got somebody who looks after the education and research side of things. And I'm sure you have regular reviews and meetings. How do you adapt new technology, and how do you make that part of your system in order to improve outcomes? Any thoughts about this?
Yeah. Thank you, Aruna. That's a good question, because the world is changing so rapidly. We sometimes don't have time to even assimilate and to even think about it or take a stand, especially in some of the scientific things, the ethical side of it. But put that aside, AI has changed things. And I think one of the fears or apprehensions that I have is it going to get rid of a lot of jobs? And that worries me a bit because we have 1,800 employees and 78% are women.
Mhm.
So, and I do have a fair amount of single moms
Mhm.
in the organization. I personally encouraged women to walk out of abusive marriages and, stood by them to support them, and they walked with us for years. So, while I'm excited about embracing technology, and we are doing that all the time. We've digitalized so much in the last several years, and we're constantly at it. I know that that's going to be the downside, but I can't say no to something that's going to bring value to the organization. If ultimately it's going to make things better, patient experience far better, analysis more clear, your data is clear, then you're able to make better decisions for the organization, then there's no choice. I would embrace it. In fact, I ask for it all the time. One of the things that we try to do, Aruna, is to look for young talent,
Mhm.
because youngsters today are bright, full of ideas. And instead of looking at them as a threat, I welcome them. And it's important to have fresh winds into the organization because they challenge us, they make us think anew. And unless we do that, we would just keep cruising along.
Absolutely. As a leader, I mean, you would have faced resistance, even getting the national midwifery training out to the government, right? I mean, you would have faced so many moments of adversity, having to, let's say, have discussions with people who don't understand what you're trying to say, perspectives. How have these moments shaped you? The way you guide the institution and people. How have you been able to face, let's say, politicians or the policy makers? So is there anything that you would like to tell us about how you
Yeah,
managed to get the midwifery program right up there at the government of India level?
yeah. Thank you. Aruna, I was thoroughly spoiled because I only worked in Fernandez, except for a job in the UK. That was the only job I did. But otherwise, my entire professional life has been in Fernandez. And that's a very comfortable place to be because you're not answerable to anybody else. And if you wanted something, you just got it done. So when UNICEF approached us and Telangana government said, we want you to train 30 nurses as a pilot in midwifery over an 18-month course, we said, yeah, this is great. I was very excited. Had no idea what I had signed up for. I was extremely fortunate to have a colleague, Dr. Radha, who was at the time working for UNICEF. And I would drive to Karimnagar in the mornings because that's where we were training the nurses. And that's a 2.5 hour ride. But if you do it early morning, you can do it in 2 hours. So Radha would ride with me and I would drive there because we'd leave at 5 so that we could be there at 8 for handover and things. And we'd have a lot of conversations. And because I found it frustrating to get something done with the government, it would take months. Then you'd have to go through layers. And sometimes I would say, why am I doing this? What? And she would always bring me back and say, we are doing it for that woman in that district hospital. And she would find some positive stories. She would come back and tell me, I went into the wards. I met this woman, Indy, who was my midwifery person from the UK at the time, who was leading the training. She would come and say, hey, you know what? This woman kissed my hands. I said, which woman? The woman in the birthing room. She got hold of my hands and she kissed my hands and she said, why are you so kind to me? So when you hear stories like that, then you say, okay, it's worth it. But we were also very lucky to have the commissioner who was so committed to the cause. And she encouraged us, she threw us a
As
challenge.
a
She
lady
said,
commissioner, a lady
yes,
commissioner.
yeah.
Amazing.
She
Good.
said, Evita, I know that they will be skilled, they'll be competent. I know that your training will do that. But can you bring compassion? Can you bring respect, dignity? Can you bring that into our birthing rooms? That's the challenge I give you. And the whole basis of midwifery, Aruna, rests on respectful care, getting that woman to believe in herself, filling her with the right information, giving her the confidence, and supporting her in her choices. So, probably in the first week of our training, we had a session on birth stories. So Indy, Radha, and I are in that room, and we've got 30 nurses. I think there were only 5 who were not mothers. All the others were mothers. So we began to talk about respectful care. And then we said, would anybody like to share a birth story? What should have been a 1.5 hour session went in for hours. And we were all crying and hugging each other because each one spoke of the trauma they had experienced. And they had never voiced it for years. To me, that was a pivotal moment. I learned so much that women remember everything about their births. So they spoke about the rude behavior of the nurses, of the doctors, the indignities, the abuse. And these 30 women that day decided we will never treat women like we have been treated. Now we realize how important it is because they realized when they began to speak, there was healing. That was the transformation in these 30 nurses. And that's why they are agents of change today. And we realized that's the essence of midwifery care. So when you understand this philosophy, you have to bring it into your own practice as an obstetrician. Midwives and obstetricians, we're sharing the same focus. We're caring for women. We want to make childbirth joyous, positive experience. So the philosophy is the same. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Very moving. I've got hair standing up.
No, I couldn't stop
Goosebumps.
crying that day.
Oh,
I mean, it
yeah.
just
Well, I've
changed
seen the
all of.
entire spectrum. I've seen the Vani Vilas Hospital in my time when I was doing post graduation, where women would just be, birthed on a steel cot. Women would just come in labor. They would sometimes have to be delivered while they're on the floor.
Mm,
Um, I mean, just the sheer volumes they've changed a lot. Yes, and then of course the UK is a completely different
mm,
experience, and now working in a corporate hospital is a completely different experience. So having seen the spectrum, I think the one thread that definitely should connect them all is sheer compassion and empathy, and having a personal experience certainly definitely helps.
mm,
And I think
mm,
that's what happened in the room that day. So
mm.
absolutely.
And if you go to Vani Villas now, Aruna, and I urge
Mm.
you to go,
Yeah.
you'll be
Yes.
surprised. They've got
Yeah.
a
No, I have
midwifery.
actually.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been there, and I'm in touch with all the professors and assistant professors there. They're doing a tremendous job. It's much more plush, and government has put
Mm,
in a lot of funds into it,
yes.
and it's transformed. And that's a very positive change.
And they've got a midwifery unit there. So
Yes.
you've got mothers birthing in different positions, mothers using gym balls with midwives and obstetricians working together. It's amazing what's happening in Vani Vilas. It certainly gives me joy and a lot of hope because the underprivileged woman really has no choice and no voice. But here, she's getting the best care that she can, that she needs. Yeah.
Alma mater, hats off to you. Now, coming to another important aspect of life in general. I mean, how much does spirituality play a role in your journey as a leader and otherwise in general? What is it that, pushes you every single day? And how much do you sort of resort to spirituality on a daily basis? I think that's a very important aspect that we'd like to know.
Yeah. Thank you, Aruna, for this question. I think the anchor in my life has really been a deep faith in God, in a God that I believe is loving, merciful, and very, very much a part of my life. So at the age of 16, I felt this very strong calling, apart from wanting to be a doctor, to a single life. I just felt I wasn't called to marriage. I wasn't sure how it was going to unfold. And again, it was a little difficult because I'm a gregarious person, party animal. Medical college, just loved, partying and doing all the crazy things. Loved music, dance, but somehow just never felt I was called to marriage. And now, when I look back at how life unfolded, obviously God had his plan. And I have absolutely no regrets. And also, looking at the kind of personality I am, I don't think I would have survived longer than a week in marriage because I would have either committed homicide or just walked out. So, anyway, put that aside. The point is that I've always felt called to do things. So one is single life, then called to create this institute. And once that mission was over, I felt called to get into midwifery. I felt called to do respectful care. I felt called to advocate. So at different moments, it was that voice inside that said, you need to do this. This is your calling. And that, to me, is really the divine in each one of us. And so, for me, it's extremely important. It's my oxygen. I'm an early riser, so I spend at least an hour in just silence, quiet, prayer, chatting with the man above, just staying in his presence and just asking for guidance, for strength. And no matter how difficult the situation is, we've been through quite a few challenges in our journey as an organization. But all my colleagues know that no matter how terrible the situation is, we'll come through. There is a God, there is a presence with us. We don't know sometimes why things happen. There is a purpose, but it will all work out. So that has kept me going and a lot of us in the organization.
And that's some sort of meditation that you do, or just, sort of converse with God?
Yeah, earlier it used to
Out.
be a lot. Earlier it used to be a lot of talking, and almost, I mean, God is a friend. I talk to God many times during the day. But in 2009, I did the 10-day Vipassana course, and that changed my life. So I actually go into, just being there, concentrate on your breath, get all thoughts out of your head, no talking, no asking, just remaining quiet. And I used to start with 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then
And now
increase
it's a
to
whole
20.
hour.
No.
Amazing.
I don't sit a whole hour in meditation, but that 1 hour, this bit of meditation also takes its time. Depending on the days, 20 would be ideal, but I don't do 20 every day, not at all. It's between 10 and 15 minutes of just quiet, just putting every thought out of your head. That whole process of focusing on your breath brings you into focus. There's no deity, there's nothing. It's just being there in the presence of the divine. That's it.
Completely reboots you, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
resets your, yeah,
Absolutely.
lovely.
And also, you can do it when you're in a traffic jam. Instead of being frustrated and things, you can just calm yourself down
You're talking to a
and
bank audience, aren't you? That's
But
true.
no, but I'm so convinced of this need for all of us to plug in to our inner selves that we've actually ran a whole mindfulness program over 10 weeks for our heads of departments, clinical and non-clinical. One day in the week, they spent 2 hours for 10 weeks. And out of a group of 40 in the feedback, we found that 30 of them continue the practice and have found it extremely useful.
Um, and that brings me to this question of how is your typical day? When do you wake up in the morning? What are the main parts of your day that you really look forward to? I heard you're an avid swimmer in an Olympic-sized pool. You probably do an hour of
Oh,
stop laps, tremendous energy that you display, and all your colleagues are in awe of that. So please tell us, take us through your typical day. That's
yeah.
amazing.
I've always been an early riser, so I wake up around 4 o'clock most times. But it's a strange system because I stopped using an alarm unless I'm catching an early morning flight. That's when I'm a little worried. But I stopped using an alarm years ago. I just go to bed at night in a very quick kind of reflection of the day's events. And then I say, okay, God, I'm going to bed. You wake me up when you think I've had enough sleep. I just sign off. And I wake up. Sometimes I wake up after 5 hours, sometimes six. Fresh as a daisy. So there are days when I've gone to bed at 8:30 and I wake up at 2:30. Absolutely fresh. But it's that morning time of quiet and aloneness. That's my best productive time. That's when, apart from the 1 hour of me time, then if I have to think, if I have to write, if I have to prepare for a talk, if I have to read something serious, that's the time. I try to get out of the house by about 5:45. Yes, I love swimming, but haven't been able to do it for the last few months because of a frozen shoulder. So I've just been walking, but swimming is my first love. Just the sheer exercise, the rhythm. And that's my solitude time again. And that's the time when I'm also thinking of things and ideas come in when I'm just swimming up and down. Um, but yes, so the morning is really the best part of my day. The other thing that I look forward to is once a week we do what I call Employee Connect. I meet with staff at different levels in groups of 5, 6, try to keep it small and homogeneous so that they are comfortable. So I could meet with a whole bunch of housekeeping folk, or I could meet frontline desk staff, or I meet doctors sometimes. I mean, it just varies. The HR just decides where I will meet them, which unit. And that has been an absolute it's been a very moving experience, Aruna, because I'm beginning to know people that I haven't seen for years, or just getting to know who they are, what makes them tick, what are the challenges. And the other day, I met a group of what we call customer care folks, youngsters. Well, some of them have been with us 13 years, and I say 13 years. You've traveled, taken a bus, spent so much time. And they say, Dr. Evita, I've got an alcoholic husband. And the fact that we got our salaries on time, I could plan my home. So I've been able to educate my children. I've been able to, deal with it because of the fact that you gave us our wages on time, you gave us our increments, we felt safe, you respect us. And I'm not even aware, Arun, I'm not even aware of these ripples. So getting to hear these stories now, I'm just grateful that simple values that we put in as non-negotiable, and one of them was salaries to be paid on that day. There were months in the early days when I was building the organization, there wasn't enough money. I wouldn't take a salary because I'm on a salary too, because that was made very clear to me by my parents. When you go through tough times, you tighten your belt, but don't compromise on salaries for your staff. Make sure it's given on the same day. Make sure you start from bottom up. So these were carved in stone, and I didn't even bother to check whether it was being done because it was just something that was done. And so when you realize there are many other aspects of an organization that are also to be taken care of. And they were being done because, again, I was very fortunate to have the right people in the right places. So you've got an HR head who's compassionate, who feels strongly for the staff. So then she will focus on benefits, like we now have annual health check. We've now introduced a team of psychologists so that people with mental health issues can deal with them, ensuring confidentiality. And above a certain income group, this psychologist counseling sessions is free. We pay the psychologist, but the staff don't need to pay. So, there are these little things that we're trying to bring into an organization and not just focus on numbers and revenue. They are important. Don't get me wrong. Profit is not a dirty word. We are a not-for-profit. I completely converted to a not-for-profit organization in 2018 because I've always ran it as a not-for-profit. So how you make that profit is important, and what do you do with that profit is equally important. So that's what I'm learning to do at this stage of my life.
And the true qualities of a leader. I mean, going down to the grassroots level, understanding, how everybody's daily work life is. That's truly respectable, right?
Uh,
And let's talk about legacy. Legacy is often seen through the lens of achievements, right? But it's also
mm,
deeply personal. Um, so, what parts of your journey do you hope will continue to inspire not just healthcare professionals, people you touch on a daily basis, but general people in general to lead lives of compassion and service? Perhaps few important milestones that you're proud of. Perhaps something that you want to sort of carry on as a legacy, and hope that your future generations will take them along, even for the general public, for that matter.
uh, Oh, that's a tough one, Aruna. One thing I'm absolutely convinced about, Aruna, is when we die, we fade away. Okay, we're not going to be living in people's minds. And yes, I suppose some of the lives that you would have touched, people will remember you fond. But generally, we fade away, and that's fine. I don't think about that at all. But yes, I would love that some of the values that we've carved in stone in the organization, I mean, I hope they will never be, compromised. A simple one, like I told you about salaries, just making sure that people get their salaries because people are dependent on that check. Second, we believe very strongly, Aruna, that life comes from God and life begins at conception. So we're 76 years old as an organization, and we wouldn't terminate a pregnancy unless the woman's life is at risk. Having said this, it doesn't mean that we would condemn or judge any woman who wants it. Not at all. The absolute compassion. If a woman wants a termination, she walks in, you listen. If she wants to continue, we offer her all the support, including financial support. If she doesn't, then we suggest she goes to a safe place. So I don't want that value to be compromised because life is sacred. I wouldn't want the value of turning away somebody just because they can't afford it. That's something we feel strongly about. So if I'm thinking of anything, I would just want these values to continue, not to be, compassion, respect, um, openness, transparency. Um, so it's those things I guess I would want to continue.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter. People are not going to remember me, and that doesn't matter at all. But if those values can continue, I think it would be worth all the struggle.
And that's certainly not true. People are going to remember you for a very, very long time, as long as they live. I'm sure of that. And they will tell the stories to their children and grandchildren, and the legacy will continue. There's no doubt about it. Dr. Fernandez, you've been a pioneer in promoting natural birthing in India. We know that. But do you have any message for young expectant mothers nowadays who might be listening to this episode about, why it is so important to achieve a vaginal delivery? Nowadays pregnancy is so anxiety filled.
Mm,
It's kind of almost treated like a disease, which is unfortunate. People
mm,
have a lot of tocophobia, fear of childbirth, fear of pregnancy itself,
mm,
getting
mm,
pregnant later in their lives, late 30s, early 30s, late
mm.
30s, even into early 40s, having fertility issues, nuclear families, work stress, having to sort of achieve a good work life balance, maybe
Mm,
marital discord, having ego tussles almost on a
yes.
daily basis. I mean, what do you want to tell them out there, young,
Mhm.
expectant couples, mothers who might be listening to us today?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for raising this. And I agree. All that you mentioned, this is part of today's life. I mean, the stress that women go through. But again, thanks to my whole journey with midwifery, I would want every woman who's pregnant to make that whole journey to motherhood joyous and fulfilling in every way. And that can happen, Aruna, only first if she is given the right information, the right knowledge, and is prepared to handle labor and childbirth. Because I've seen it when we have mothers who attend childbirth classes, when they come in labor, they are confident.
Yes.
They are determined to have a normal birth. So one is remove fear by filling her with the right information. Second, assure her, ask her what her birth choices are. So I want women to be aware that it's their basic human right to ask for things during birth. Nobody should be denied that. Third, I want no woman to birth without her chosen birth companion. It could be her spouse, it could be her sister, but she should be given that freedom. And women birthing in private institutes should demand this. I know a lot of private hospitals today don't allow a birth companion, and that's so tragic. I want women to believe that the bodies that are nurturing that baby, that same body is built to birth. And that confidence can grow with knowledge, with a supporting companion, and of course, staff that also believe in the philosophy. So, that's my dream for every young woman or even a woman who's in her 40s. I mean, the oldest mother I was privileged to birth was 43. It didn't stop her from having a normal birth. So I think we obstetricians have to actually get rid of our own fears, and it
Yeah.
takes time and discipline. It wasn't easy for me to let go of all my fears. But over time and with conviction, I know that women's bodies are built to birth if we obstetricians would let nature take its course and not interfere
True, true.
unnecessarily.
Absolutely. No, I truly believe that the confidence building exercise throughout her antenatal journey is very important. And all
Very,
these
very.
childbirth sessions, antenatal sessions, they add a lot. Dr. Evita, you've been bestowed upon so many awards, accolades. I mean, I know of a few, but which one do you hold most dear and why? What was the accolade or the award that you really felt was
Mhm.
something that uh, you truly deserved and was quite pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Well, Aruna, I've always been an average student. I've never received any medals or prizes for academics or anything. Very average. So I really have not received awards as such in my life. And so in 2014, when the Civil Society magazine wrote to me and said, we've got a jury and you've been chosen for this award because of what you're offering in maternal health and newborn services and your midwifery program. I was totally taken aback. What? Where is this coming from? And thanks to somebody who obviously believed in what we were doing and nominated Fernandez. So to me, that would always be a special because that was the first time Fernandez got an award and was recognized for the work we were doing, and that too midwifery. So I guess that would always remain special. And subsequently, there have been awards, but Aruna, the way I look at an award, it's an endorsement of the work being done at Fernandez. So it's an award for Fernandez. I just happen to be the person who's receiving it. But it's really every time someone does want to give us an award or some recognition, I'm just grateful because it helps endorse what we are doing. I've never looked upon it as a personal achievement. No, for me, Fernandez is a family and organization where people have given me the best years of their productive lives. And I'm very, very conscious of that and grateful to them for doing so because it is the people who have helped bring Fernandez to where we are today. I'm very, very aware of that.
So you dedicated to your team rather than yourself, which is, again, humility personified.
It's the truth. It's the truth. It's the truth.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. And you've been also given the accolade of Pride of Telangana, and that's amazing. And you are truly the pride of Telangana in every single way, every way possible. So when you reflect on your personal journey and the team journey and the institutional journey, both as a leader and as a woman, what advice would you give to those who struggle with balancing their sense of purpose with the pressures of daily life? Is there anything that you'd like to advise
Yeah,
them?
I think that's a tough one, Aruna, because I chose the easy path. I remained single, so I really didn't have the pressures of working women. I mean, my mother was a great role model who balanced everything, but I didn't have to face the challenges that working women face, the roles that they play. And my respect for working women is huge. I can see, particularly in the younger group, like the registrars, the junior consultants. In fact, our attrition in the organization is in that group because they really find the volumes and the work at Fernandez quite tiring, and it's difficult to balance. So one of the ways that as an organization we're trying to cope with this is to change our patterns of work, the duty hours, can we be more flexible and things. And I would like to tell young colleagues, if they want to really offer maternity and newborn services, and that's important for them, they're passionate about it, don't work solo. Work with a team, build teams, even if it's another colleague. Start working together. Don't work in isolation because that helps. See, that's the USP of Fernandez. We built teams, and 15 years ago and more, we've told mothers, in fact, every mother signs a consent form saying we work as a team. You may not get the doctor of your choice, but the doctor you're booked under will be told about your condition. And so my colleagues don't have to birth every woman that's booked with them. They are on call one day in the week. Some of them now no longer are on call, but are on backup call. So you have time for your family. When you work in this kind of an environment, you have days when you don't have to be on call. So I think that makes a huge difference. But I don't think it'll ever be easy. I think as a working woman, I mean, as a mother, you're constantly going to negotiate. And I think it's a constant tussle. I don't think there are easy answers.
And people push pregnancy for careers, and that's probably not the right thing to do, right? I think I did think simultaneously, and I think we should encourage women to sort of think about career and personal life and family as something which is parallel rather than separate from each other. That's another big challenge that we're facing.
Yes.
Oh, that's great, Dr. Fernandez. I mean, you've been so patient and so insightful, so many things to learn from your life. To wrap up our conversation, is there a favorite quote you'd like to share with our audience? Something that you'd like to leave us with?
I think, I don't know, what has helped me throughout life is, of course, Gandhi's quote that keeps popping in my head: be the change you want to see. So that's been something that's constantly driving me to do what I do. But two lines, and I'm not sure who said them or where they came from, but this too will pass. When in the darkest moments, nothing is permanent. So this too will pass, and tomorrow is a new day. This has helped me through many dark moments, just hang in there. Of course, it's based on a deep-rooted belief that there is God who's working ultimately and controlling. So you have to surrender, you have to trust.
Thank you, Dr. Fernandez, for sharing your
Thank you.
incredible
Thank you,
journey.
Aruna. I feel very privileged and honored that you felt investing, that you wanted to invest in time for this conversation.
It's our
Thank you.
privilege and honor, and the wisdom you've gained along the way is going to help so many of us. Your passion for maternal health care, your commitment to empowering women, empowering your staff have truly inspired all of us. The leadership that you have, shown, I think it's amazing. As we wrap up, I'd like to give you a sneak peek into our next episode. We'll be joined by yet another remarkable individual, someone whose work has impacted countless lives and continues to make a lasting difference. Stay tuned and remember to subscribe to Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more inspiring conversations from Luminary Lounge, insights from lives well lived. Thank you very much indeed.